They were warned to make no future attempts to rebuild their weapons program, and in particular, nuclear weapons. Yet they continue, starting it all over. We are in negotiations with them. They want to make a deal, but we haven't heard those secret words. We will never have a nuclear weapon.
And that was President Trump at the State of the Union address 2 nights ago, where he was laying out kind of the justification for why we're going after Iran. A lot of his supporters did that a lot more forcefully, but he is still laying out the foundation. You can't be a nuclear weapon, which is the same thing he said prior to the 2025 attack to justify why we allegedly went after their nuclear facilities at that time here. Now, what he is setting forth with all of this combat power that he's put in the region, and then now a number of folks that he keeps sending out to make statements, they are trying rather to lie you into a war. This is straight from the playbook. George W. Bush successfully getting us into the war against Iraq in 2003, weapons of mass destruction, connections with Al-Qaeda, all of that crap. This is following the same kind of playbook here. The only difference is that Bush had a very definite plan and a very conniving and dark plan underneath, and it was sophisticated in how it went about doing it. They even tried to go through the rigmarole of making it, justifying it, and then getting actual UN Security Council resolutions, congressional authority, etc. This one seems to be a lot looser than that. President Trump seems to be doing it kinda, then he'll be ready to give the order, and then all of a sudden he won't. His knees go weak, whatever. He reconsiders it, which of course I'm a strong advocate of. He definitely should keep reconsidering it. He should not order this to go. But it looks like he's now setting the stage, and many of his advisors and some of his closest allies and assets are aggressively pushing this war. Well, now that it's kind of moving into a new phase. Now then, beginning just last night, they're trying to lie us into this war. And now then they're putting a lot of feet behind it, because I don't know if it's over or if it's still going on even as we speak right now, but there has been nuclear negotiations between the United States and Iran today in Geneva. In fact, I saw this just a second ago. Let's see if I can. Oh, good. I had it on my screen there and just thought, nope, well, I may have it here. Sorry, I had it on my screen and it's been taken off. Sorry, blew that one. Bottom line is, though, according to sources close to the White House, the negotiations between U.S. and Iran with Witkoff and Jared Kushner, they were disappointed. They were disappointed in how things worked out there. Now, if they're disappointed with what they were going into, then that keys us into we're probably closer to going to war. Last night, Secretary of State Marco Rubio started setting the stage for really undercutting this war here, these negotiations that were happening today. And by the way, President Trump, at the end of that soundbite we played there from the State of the Union, said, I still haven't heard those magic words. We're not going to build a nuclear weapon. Of course he has. On that day, the same day that he said it, the foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, put out an X account that verbatim, flatly, declaratively stated, we are not pursuing a nuclear weapon. We had a deal, the 2015 JCPOA nuclear deal, to make sure that they didn't. Of course, we got out of that, and everybody knows what has happened all the time since there. Everything we've ever had to actually make them not do it, they haven't. Yeah, there it is right there. That's what he said. Crystal clear, Iran will under no circumstances ever develop a nuclear weapon. So he says he hadn't heard the words, and there they are on the same day. That's important to understand there. So, well, we can't have that. So now we'll don't believe them. They're lying. They're lying. You can't trust them at all. That's another common theme. Trust us, though. Listen to us. What we say is true. What everything they say is untrue. And then now the people are going to go. And I'm going to show you a series of people making statements that are going to build on several things. It's going to build on fear. It's going to build on concerns about what may happen to us, and it's going to be on outright lies about the nature of Shia Islam. It's going to be about the what they would do if they had one, et cetera, stuff that's completely unsubstantiated, but it doesn't matter. It's all about fear. And we're going to start with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who starts the lie fest out when he's talking here about how urgent this is and what's going to happen if the talks fail.
First and foremost, after their nuclear program was obliterated, they were told not to try to restart it, and here they are. You can see them always trying to rebuild elements of it. They're not enriching right now, but they're trying to get to the point where they ultimately can. The other thing I would point you to, however, is that Iran possesses a very large number of ballistic missiles, particularly short-range ballistic missiles that threaten the United States and our bases in the region and our partners in the region. And all of our bases in the UAE, in Qatar, in Bahrain. And they also possess naval assets that threaten shipping and try to threaten the U.S. Navy. So I want everybody to understand that beyond just the nuclear program, they possess these conventional weapons that are solely designed to attack America.
100% lie there. Categorically, that's a lie. And it's not even hard to figure out. That's obvious. They have a Navy, mainly of speedboats. It's a very small Navy, but they have one. They have an Air Force. It's a small one, but they have one. They have a substantial missile force and apparently some kind of a robust, we don't know how good it is yet, not really, but it is somewhat capable air defense force. But he says all of these things exist solely, his word, solely to attack America. Okay, you're going to see this theme pop up in here. Really? So all these things they have is solely to attack America. How many times, Mr. Secretary, has Iran in its 47-year history, has it attacked America? Meaning not retaliating for anything else, but attacked America. I'm sorry, what was that again? I'm sorry, it sounds like you're saying, you're not saying anything. Zero. They have never done it. And yet you're claiming that they have these missiles solely to attack the United States. Well, who have they used them on? From Iran, I'm talking about, not the proxies, but Iran itself. They've used them to respond to attacks from Israel. So they have used them to attack into Israel. And they have on 2 occasions used them to respond to the United States. Once in 2020, when we assassinated their General Soleimani, and it was a demonstration kind of thing, which was designed to make sure the thing didn't explode out. So they were limited, and in retaliation for an assassination that we had done. And then, of course, in 2025, in response to our attack to destroy their nuclear facilities, they had another demonstration at our air base in Qatar, which caused a little bit of damage, but it was tightly choreographed and limited to make sure it didn't turn into a war. That's the irrational nature of the very rational Islamic Republic regime, in that they don't want a war because they know that they can't start a war with the United States and win it. If they start something, they know that if it goes a long term, because if they were to start something, then that would give every justification in the world, and America would be 100% behind it, whatever it took to win. And that they know they can't win a war of attrition against the United States. They're eventually going to war out. If it works that way, it's likely that that would be the case. So they won't do it, and they never have. Why they have those missiles, why they have those speedboats and their Navy and everything else, is to defend themselves like every other nation on the bloody planet. That's self-evident. But he's counting on people not thinking that through and just listening to his words and taking him at his words. And I'm telling you, and I'm sorry about this, very sorry, but the lies that have been told, and unfortunately this goes way before him. I mean, you can go back more than a couple of decades, really, but especially in the last 10 or so years. And this is during the Obama administration, the first Trump administration, many times on many categories during the Biden administration. And then now here we are with Rubio. They lie so often, you can't take anything at face value. Sometimes they tell the truth and kind of slip you up. So you have to pay attention and you have to go and corroborate everything. So it doesn't take much to figure out that part's a lie. Obviously, that their weapons are not solely to attack America, or they would have already done it. And when they responded to our attacks, they would have done more than just a token shot. They haven't. So that's a lie. So let's look at what else did he say that's also a lie.
Trying to achieve intercontinental ballistic missiles. For example, you've seen them try to launch satellites into space. You've seen them increasing the range of the missiles they have now. And clearly they are headed in the pathway to one day being able to develop weapons that could reach the continental U.S. They already possess weapons that could reach much of Europe, already now, as we speak. And the ranges continue to grow every single year exponentially, which is amazing to me. For a country that's facing sanctions, whose economy is in tatters, whose people are suffering, and somehow they still find the money to invest in missiles of greater and greater capacity every year. This is an unsustainable threat.
Unsustainable threat. So there you go. So it's fear that they're having an intercontinental ballistic missile, an ICBM, to attack America. That's what he's telling you. So now you get the fear part in here, fear for us. And oh, by the way, fear for our European allies too. They're having all these weapons that can go to Europe. Like that's their priority target list. They have never attacked anybody in Europe. They've never even talked about attacking anybody in Europe. So why do we get that? Well, he's counting on you not to actually think that through. He's counting on you to go, oh, what? Our allies in Europe too? They're threatening everybody? That's what he's counting on. So he's counting on fear. He's counting on ignorance. And he is lying to you for the intent to use your emotions to whip you up into something that you will then support a war of choice. And let's be crystal clear on this. If we launch this, this is 100% a war of choice that we are painstakingly building, every bit as much as the one that President Bush did when he got us into the Iraq War. That's what you need to know. This is following that same playbook. It's more clumsy. It's not as sophisticated, but it's generally following the same playbook. Well, there's another kind of fear here. Now that we need to go back and we're gonna play here on something. This is just hours ago, by the way, on the U.S. Senate floor. Senator Kennedy is trying to make you again afraid of what happened after 9/11. We had the Muslims fear that everybody should fear all the Muslims, and now he's going to resurrect that fear and do it one better.
I'm entitled to believe what I want, but the Ayatollah not only thinks that I'm going to hell because I don't agree with his religion, he wants to kill me. He wants to kill Americans and Israelis and anybody who does not believe in his jihad and drink our blood out of a boot. And he's acted on that. I don't need to tell you, Mr. President. I don't need to tell you. And he has acted on that. And that's not acceptable. When the Ayatollah has decided he wants a nuclear war yet. Why should we care? You know, I hear from some of my fellow Americans all the time, why do we need to be involved in Iran? Why should we care? Well, number one, we're not trying to start a war in Iran. The president is trying to end a war in Iran. If the Ayatollah gets a nuclear weapon, he will use it.
He's trying to end a war in Iran. I mean, that's okay. I said he was going to do it one better. He tried to do it two better, but then he just like, man, that's like you're about to run over the goal line and you fumble. What do you mean he's trying to end a war? What does that even mean? What war is it he's trying to end by a war? I mean, that is so irrational and illogical. It doesn't make any sense. But let's back up a little bit earlier. What he said there, that the Ayatollah wants to drink our blood in a boot, and he's acted on it. I mean, what does that even mean? I don't remember any stories about the Ayatollah killing Americans, draining their blood into a boot, and then drinking their blood. I don't know. Maybe I missed it. But that is just more of the weirdness. And this is not just an issue of colloquialism, which Senator Kennedy is famous for. This is just bizarre. But yet, here he is on the Senate floor trying to convince you that you should go to war. And then he just declares categorically, the Ayatollah has decided to build a bomb. What? Based on what? Where is your evidence? Because everything we've had up to this point, everything we have had for 47 years. Apparently, they had earlier in their history some what do you call it? Not historical research process where they were looking to some of this, and then apparently they chose for whatever reasons in 2003 to shut it down and mothball it. We discovered this later. They didn't do it under pressure. They chose for whatever their reasons were. They were doing the research, and then they decided to mothball it in 2003 and set it aside. Since that time, according to British intelligence, according to American intelligence, every single administration since 2003 has declared intelligence report that they have not made a decision to build a bomb. They have capacity to do so, but they have not made a decision. Therefore, they have not taken any action. As recently as March of last year, Tulsi Gabbard went before the Senate and said the same thing. They have not made a decision to get a bomb. even though the breakout time continues to shrink because their capacity is going up. Well, now then he's just like, you know what? Forget about all that. I'm just going to declare on my own authority that they have. And then he goes it one better than that and just says, if they get it, they're going to use it. So you have to believe that Shia Islam, first of all, wants to kill everybody. Let's start with the lies, first of all. That's a bald-faced lie. And it's again, not hard to expose as a lie. He says that the Ayatollah thinks that his version of Shia Islam is the only one that's legitimate and that he's going to kill everybody else, i.e., if he gets the bomb, he's going to come kill us, because that's what it's all about, according to him. That's why you should be afraid, because just by his nature, by the fact that he exists, it's a threat to your life that he's going to come after us. Well, as it turns out, there are about 93 million people in Iran. And somewhere between 90 and 95%, we'll take the 90% for ease of discussion here, are Shia Islam. So if he wants to kill all the non-Shia Muslims, and that means the Sunni Muslims, because Sunni Muslims is one of the biggest challenges that they have, even more so than other religions, because they think it's the wrong version. And that's why there's been a lot of fighting between Shia and Sunni Islam over the years. So inside of Iran, where they have full control, remember, the baseline here, you're told that the Ayatollah wants to kill everybody, to include apparently Senator Kennedy, that's not a Shia Muslim. That's what he said. That's why you should be afraid. Well, it turns out that there's also about 5% of the population, 5% of 90 million, that are Sunni Islam. There's another about 1 to 2% that's a combination of the Baha'i faith, which is the largest non-Muslim majority, about 300,000 of those. There's about 300 to 370,000 Christians, Zoroastrianisms, even about 8,000 Jews, which is pretty surprising. And then there's a lot of other people that aren't even any kind of religion at all. Wait a minute. They're not Shia Muslims. They're inside Iran. And wait, they're not dead? So whatever that total is, when you add all those percentages up, somewhere around of all the non-Shia Muslims, 8-9 million. Why hasn't he killed them all? If that's what he's really about, Senator Kennedy said, if he was telling you the truth, then those people should be dead 47 years ago. Or he's had 47 years to slaughter all those people, and yet he hasn't, because that's not his deal. That's not what they do. That's not the nature of the debate between the two. It's not an existential thing where they say, yes, we're going to kill everyone who doesn't believe the way we do, or he would have done it. So if he hasn't killed the 8 or 9 million people in his borders about over which he has full power and control, then by what logic can he say that can Senator Kennedy get you to believe that he's going to go outside of his borders to the United States of America, according to President Trump, according to the Secretary of Defense, the most powerful military in the history of the world, and they're going to come to us? Apparently, they're doing everything they can to get a nuclear weapon, which they haven't done since at least the first 47 years, up through at least March of last year, unless Tulsi Gabbard was lying to us. Don't think she was. So apparently they have changed their mind now, and they're going to try and get a nuclear weapon, get an ICBM, according to Rubio, put that missile on top of it, and then fire it. As soon as they get it, that's their objective, is then they're going to fire it at America. And what are they going to do? If everything worked flawlessly, according to these two gentlemen, it's going to hit some city somewhere, and then there's going to be, 100 or 150 nuclear weapons in return and obliterate Iran. That's what would happen. So you're being asked to believe, let's consolidate this down here. You're being asked to believe that even though for 47 years, Iran has not killed all the non-Shia Muslims, and even though they have not developed a nuclear weapon in 47 years, that now all of a sudden, after having their nuclear process apparently obliterated last June, now that they've decided to get one, and as soon as they do, they're going to put it on an ICBM that they have yet to develop, but as soon as they get it, they're going to fire this one missile and kill a bunch of Americans wherever it lands, and then they're going to be obliterated after that. Do you see how ridiculous and absurd that sounds at face value? Yet that's what they're not. These are lies, my friend. Understand that. If you're a dyed-in-the-wool red MAGA Republican, if you love President Trump, you cannot miss the fact that you are being lied to. that the administration and the Republican allies in the Senate are crafting intentional and known lies to try to manipulate your emotions, to make you afraid of something that could happen, to make you afraid of the nature and the existence of Iran, etc., to justify a war, so that if they launch one, a war of choice, then they expect you to support it. And of course, they'll come out and say, yes, we did this as a preemptive thing. And it's just like George Bush. And in fact, speaking of George Bush, there's somebody who has called this out. There's somebody, can't remember how long, it was a little bit a while ago, somebody else called this out that you might listen to.
The war in Iraq, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We don't even have it. Iran is taking over Iraq with the second largest oil reserves in the world. Obviously, it was a mistake.
So
George Bush made a mistake. We can make mistakes, but that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
But so you still think he should be impeached?
I think it's my turn, isn't it?
You do whatever you want. You call it whatever you want. I want to tell you, they lied.
Okay.
They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
All right.
Can I disagree with candidate Trump in 2016? They lied, he emphatically said before the camera. They knew there was no weapons of mass destruction. They lied us into a war. And now the current administration is trying to lie us into a war. You're seeing it on graphic display right here before you. And look, this in case you're thinking, well, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. This is in Politico today. There's an article that says they're recognizing the difficulty, which is why I think you had Rubio last night, why you had Senator Kennedy today. They're trotting out all the people here. Gary, if you could pull that, no, not that one, the Politico one. It says White House officials believe that the politics are a lot better if Israel strikes Iran first. Senior advisors to President Donald Trump. Understand that. Senior advisors to President Trump prefer Israel to strike Iran before the United States launches an assault on the country, according to people who are familiar with it. These Trump administration officials are privately arguing that an Israeli attack would trigger Iran to retaliate, and by that they mean against American targets, helping muster support for American voters for a U.S. strike. There's thinking in and around the administration that the politics are a lot better if the Israelis go first and alone, and the Iranians retaliate against us and give us more reason to take action. Do you understand what's being said right there, friends? They're saying that these guys are going, okay, well, we have some hard time. Maybe we're not going to succeed getting people to believe this enough. So we're trotting out all these people, the Secretary of State, U.S. senators on the Senate floor, and some other folks here going on television networks I'm going to show you in just a second, so that they can get people to agree to. But if they don't, and so far the polling is indicating they don't, this is why they're concerned. Here, if you could put that Quinnipiac poll up there now, this says that 70%, 7 out of 10 voters do not want the U.S. to take military action against Iran for killing protesters or for any other reason, apparently. It says that the president should seek congressional approval, and another 70% say that the president should seek congressional approval before taking military action. They don't want to do that. And in fact, there was supposed to have been earlier this week a war powers resolution vote by Representatives Massey and Ro Khanna. That didn't happen. That got pushed back and buried. I don't know what happened to it, but you can imagine a lot of pressure. They don't want to take the vote. Nobody in Congress wants to put their name on anything. They want to abdicate their power, and then they want the administration to act on its own, so that then all they can do is say, my hands are clean. And if it works, yes, that's terrible. It's a good thing we went after it. If it doesn't work, it's like, I didn't know. I was lied to, right? So that's one of the reasons why they're not going to do it. And they see the American polls say, no, that's not what we support. So now they're looking for some other help. If we can't lie our way into it, into a war of choice that we start, then how's about our buddy Israel start it? And then when they retaliate and blow up Americans, now we have to respond, and now it makes it easier. So to be clear, listen, this is not in the article, but make sure you do not miss this. You have senior administration officials openly saying we want Israel to start a war against Iran, and we want Iran to retaliate and kill Americans in the region, blow up bases, knock down, well, it wouldn't be knocking down airplanes at that time, but he wants them to either attack ships in the region or the bases in. He wants that to happen so that when Americans are dead, now then President Trump in umbrage and just incredulous and angry. How dare they do this? We're going to go. And then they're going to get the rally around the flag deal. They'll have all of Congress rallying behind it, etc. Don't miss that. You're being lied to. And they're also saying, hey, but if that doesn't work, if the lies don't work, we need a backup plan. We need Israel to launch a war and Americans to get killed. So then we have to go in there. That is dastardly. I'm calling this out for what it is, folks. It's right there for you to see. Not hard to see. The lies are embarrassingly pathetic. They're paper thin. It's easy to see through them. And then you have this openly in the press. We're trying to get to a situation to where Americans can get killed to make it easier for us to get into a war that 70% of Americans are opposed to. That is one of the bigger alarm bells that should be going off, that our government is trying to ignore 70% of Americans, red or blue. This is 70% of all Americans don't want a war with Iran. And for whatever reason, the administration seems to, and they're by hook or by crook doing everything they can to get this started. We'll see what's going to happen with that. But I do want to go a couple of others. I mentioned earlier that Rakshi has mentioned that they don't want a nuclear weapon. Well, he has also expressly said in these negotiations that we're only willing to talk about this narrow band, how much enrichment material they're going to be able to reprocess, what they're going to do with the reprocessed material they have. They are willing to negotiate and give in on some of those things, but they say not on the long-range missiles, not on our what they call regional support, what we call proxies, not willing to do that. So that was said before we ever got here. So when Rubio adds that the night before these, that it has to include the missiles, it has to include proxies, he knows that that's not going to happen. So when that report comes out just a few minutes ago that Jared Kushner and Witkoff were disappointed with what they were intended to be disappointed if they went in with that message. And the Iranians already said that's not on the table. We're not going to literally just denude ourselves, so we have no ability to defend ourselves. No nation would do that. So you're asking something that you know that they can't agree to, so that negotiations fail. And we have, look at some of the non-governmental folks here. Here is Rebecca Grant, who seems to think we're really close to launching.
First of all, the deployment of F-22s into Israel tells me this is very serious and perhaps very imminent. That said, Ambassador Witkoff is probably the one person who could get this done. So I'm going to give him still a chance to get Iran to agree. I mean, Carly, it's a no-brainer. Iran needs to give up that 972 pounds of enriched uranium and curtail their missile programs. That's the bottom line that President Trump has to hold out for.
A no-brainer. Is it a no-brainer? Because I kind of think it's a brainer that you're asking a country to give up its only demonstrated genuine capacity to deter attack against it. That's the reason why Israel only had a 12-day war last year, because they were getting hit too much and they couldn't stop the Iranian missiles. So they had incentive to stop the war then to try to figure something else out. So now then you think that there's any kind of no-brainer opportunity to say, hey, how's about you guys just give up your only means of self-defense, not have a nuclear weapon, so you can't have that in the future either. And then you'll be utterly defenseless against Israel if they want to do anything to in the future. And for that, we give you nothing. We just don't attack you. I mean, that's basically what we're being offered here. So I kind of think it's a brainer. We'll see what's going to happen with that. But another person here, another former military guy, General H.R. McMaster, former national security advisor for President Trump in his first term, went on CBS News and gave this gem of wisdom.
It's likely that the U.S. will strike, and it's likely that it will be a very significant strike, because what you want to do is take out with the means of retaliation that the Iranians have. This would be missile sites, missile capabilities, maybe the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps Navy, for example, that's been harassing our ships, their drone capabilities. And then I imagine, because what we're seeing is massive protests again in Iran across about 20 universities, 14 of them in Tehran. You're seeing the besieged brutally put them down again, using ambulances to deliver these besieged thugs into the middle of college campuses. So I think President Trump will move toward a strike, for these reasons.
Yeah. So if all the other ones were about fear, they're coming after us. They want to kill us just because of the nature of who they are, and now they're going to tug at your heartstrings. And it's like, oh, those poor protesters, they're just being killed there. We got to go and do something about it. Even though he sort of fails to mention that they rose up in this particular case anyway, primarily because we facilitated it. I've shown you Scott Bessent bragged in Senate testimony very much in the public that we intentionally debased their currency. We undercut it. We've got all these sanctions on it for the purpose of destroying their ability to do commerce that caused the people to, according to him, not me interpreting anything, he said that caused the people to protest. We know for sure that there were all kinds of support from the outside. Mike Pompeo has talked about it. Mossad was there. Probably others were there as well. You had Senator Cruz recently saying that we should arm the protesters, et cetera, everything to facilitate disruption from within. And those poor people are being killed that we wanted to. That's exactly what we want. Just like in the Politico article, there are administration officials that hope Israel starts a war so that Americans get killed to make it easier to go into war here. We set up a condition to where Iranian people, many of whom who have legitimate beefs against their government, many of whom have been protesting for many years because they genuinely don't like the Islamic regime. But we took those and used it for our purposes to get them stirred up, give them weapons and other ammunition, and information, et cetera, to help to coordinate things so that they would rise up, hoping that the Iranian people would then kill them, the security services, and then we would use that to tug at the heartstrings of Americans that we got to go in there. Do you see what's happening here, my friend? Everywhere you want to look, you're being lied to and you're being manipulated into a war you don't want. And none of us need. Even that 30% that somehow is okay with this war, you don't need it. No one needs it except for whatever twisted reason these elites have. I don't know what it is. I don't even know for sure who it is because it's obviously Republican, Democrat. Doesn't seem to make any difference. All of them, all of these, so many of these elites are supportive of this. It's just insane. And a lot of the stuff is just right out in the open. I just want to make sure that you are well aware you are being attempted to be manipulated to support the murderous desires of someone else to do something that the vast majority of Americans clearly communicate they don't want. That's your government in 2026. That's how it's working. Now, before I let you go today, there's one other topic I want to talk about, which is even in some ways more dire than that, because this has to do with ourselves at home. Now, I've been having a series that's been going on for over a year now. It's called The Next American Civil War. This is update number 6. And unfortunately, the conditions here, this is not, I'm about to show you some things from President Trump from the State of the Union address, which is just the latest indicator of some real problems. But it certainly has been going on for a long time, and we're going to talk about that here too. But you need to see that we continue to go down the path where we are setting the stage for a ripping apart of the fabric that has held our country together. United States. Obviously, we're anything but that right now. But the tears continue, and they're intentional, and they're being driven by ideological desires and just a hatred for our fellow man, and especially my tribe against your tribe, red versus blue. It's not just difference of governing philosophy. It's not just a difference of, well, I believe this and you believe that. And we have this country, this United States, and sometimes the red side's on top, sometimes the blue side's on top. Sometimes you win elections, sometimes you lose elections. When you lose, you just say, oh, that's bad. It's going to be bad for the country because I think I had better ideas. But hey, we'll get them next time. We're going to recuperate and recalibrate what we're doing. We're going to learn our lessons, and we're going to get the vote out better, and we're going to get better messaging, whatever. And you're going to come up with policies that America likes, and then you'll go after it the next time. That's what used to be the case. Most of my adult life, especially when I was younger, that's kind of how things worked. Now then, however, we demonize each other. And listen, don't tune this out. Don't think, okay, well, that's just stuff that's been going on for a long time. You need to understand it is deteriorating. It is getting worse. And I'm going to show you exactly why it is. So President Trump, during the State of the Union address, during one particular part. I think it was toward the end of this. As is always the case in these things, it doesn't matter whether it's Republican or Democrat president. Almost every time they say stuff, their side of the aisle jumps up and claps, and whatever, the other side stays sitting down, or sometimes they even boo, whatever. But so that's normal. That happens all the time. It does now anyway. So that had been happening all night. But in this particular case, President Trump said something that the Republicans loved, and jumped up and they were cheering. That you're going to see, in the midst of the cheers, he's going to look over to his right, I think, and he's going to see to the left of the chamber. He's going to see nobody standing up there, and it's going to kind of irk him a little.
Look, nobody stands up. These people are crazy. I'm telling you, they're crazy. Amazing. Boy, oh boy. We're lucky we have a country. With people like this, Democrats are destroying our country, but we've stopped it just in the nick of time, didn't we?
I mean, when this is no longer an issue where I have policy differences between the sides. Now he is demonizing them. He is demonizing as a category, all of them, all the Democrats, calling them a danger to the nation. And when you keep reiterating that message long enough, now it's not just our fellow Americans whom I happen to disagree with. Now I view you as a threat and a danger, and I have to deal with the danger. And if I can't do it at the poll, then the thought is going to start, it's going to get into some other areas here. You're going to use violence to get it done. And if you think, well, that won't happen here, I guarantee you, my friend, it will happen, because we're human beings, just like people in all kinds of other governing situations, other countries throughout history have done the exact same thing. When you view an internal situation as a threat, you will take action at some point if it doesn't go your way, and especially when it's fanned at the top. Now, listen, President Trump, at his inauguration, seemed to say he was going to break with what it is, because Joe Biden did this a lot, as you're going to see in just a second. But President Trump said, no, I'm going to break away from that. And I remember watching this live, and I'm thinking, good. Because President Trump had apparently escaped an assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, and had said, oh, I've been talking to God, and I think God saved me for something. And for a while, he was kind of conciliatory, and he was not as aggressive and attacking against the Democrats as it was. And I thought, okay, maybe this is going to be real. Maybe he's going to mean this, because here's what he said.
My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier.
Peacemaker and unifier. That's what he wants to do, he said. That's the most important thing for me. That lasted about 20 minutes, apparently, because then it was shortly thereafter things started going south. And then, we are where you saw 2 nights ago. Well, President Trump didn't start this. He's just taking it down the road. And it's worthy of showing that what his immediate predecessor did. And let's go back to 2020. We went back to 2016 early with President Trump, who at that time was talking about the lies that the George Bush administration said. Here we have, back in 2020, we have Joe Biden saying also, hey, you know what? It's time to turn the page.
I pledge to be a president who seeks not to divide, but unify. Who doesn't see red states and blue states, only sees the United States.
I remember watching that too. My wife and I said, I don't agree with a lot of his policies, but that's who the electorate won. He's the president of the United States. Let's hope that he means that, because that's one thing that was already recognized as a real problem, the antipathy and the anger between the red and the blue. And so he says, no red states, no blue states, the United States. We thought, terrific. That's what he's going to do. And that didn't last long either. And then it was, I think in 2023, this next clip, when he went completely opposite.
Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. But there's no question that the Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And that is a threat to this country.
So he did exactly the same thing that I just complained about President Trump doing. He just, as a category, said all of the MAGA Republicans and the Republican Party, so a huge portion of America, half basically of the political entity you just said are an extremist and a threat to the democracy, a threat to the nation. What do you think people are going to do when they get categorized like that and you tell them they're the enemy? And believe me, none of that stuff is going to change. So the reaction that it had, and I remember watching a lot of this at the time too, a lot of the Republicans were just infuriated, understandably so. Just like today, a lot of the Democrats are infuriated by what President Trump said there, and understandably so. We have got to stop this. We have got to check this, folks, or we're going to end up sometime. There's going to be some spark. It could have been what happened up in Minnesota a little while ago. I was concerned that could be a spark. We seem to have dodged a bullet with that one. But you have such a difference between the governing philosophies of the side, and now then you have the side that's in power right now that has the power to use the military, whether it's the National Guard in the cities, whether it was the ICE agents up in various countries, cities. That was Minneapolis. But you see lots of antagonism, and then there's been some violence already on the street. It didn't explode, so thank goodness for that. But this poll here, this was actually, I think, in December, that there is a growing percentage of Americans on both the right and the left. Here, if you can put that other poll up there, thank you. Is that more Americans now agree political violence may be necessary to right the country. This was just before the election, many of the elections anyway, last October. And you see there that overall 30% of the voting population thinks that that's the true statement, that violence may be necessary. 28% of Democrats, 31% of Republicans, and even 25% of independents. You might have, I kind of expected that number to be lower, but you see the overall is about 30%. That's 1 in 3 just about of Americans. 1 in 3 have this belief that it may be necessary to use violence to bring the country into the right. So understand what that's saying. That if there is some kind of event that happens, some kind of spark that happens in the future, we dodged a bullet with Minnesota, but maybe the next one we won't be able to dodge. And maybe instead of 1 or 2 people being killed, maybe it could be 15 or 20. You could have a massacre on your hand, and then people just go crazy. And then potentially, this was a concern for a while. You may have had a state National Guard and federal forces, the ICE people, potentially could have come into conflict with each other. And I can't even imagine somebody in the National Guard who wears the uniform of the United States, because we all wear the same uniform, being called into active service at some point in some state and actually having to go against either somebody they believe in themselves. Maybe it's one of their policies. Maybe they're on the side of either the R or the D, either one. And they may have to go against their own citizens in their own towns. They may have to take them under fire. That's a terrible situation to be in. Or maybe even worse, what if it's the state guard? What if they're like all in kind of in one view here, and they believe whatever the state government is wanting to have happen, and whatever policy they believe, and then you have federal forces coming in and having a very different one and having the potential for a clash. I mean, you start something like that, folks, things could get out of hand in a hurry. And if you start getting violence like that, and then people have a tendency that have power to overreact, and then you may send more National Guard forces, and then you may see more federal forces, and then you can see where it's not out of the question that the president could, if he deems it necessary, could pull in actual active duty forces to potentially go against National Guard forces. That is crazy. And if you think that's out of control, look at what President Trump did when he got the bad news on the tariffs from the Supreme Court the other day. His reaction was, oh yeah, you want to tell me I can't do that on this? Well, how's about this? How about a 10% tariff on the whole world? With this one, I can do that. And then the next morning, you know what? Actually, forget it. 15%. It just has this knee-jerk reaction out of anger, and I'll show you, here's the power I've got, and I'm going to use it right now. Now, based on what he's done in the past, he'll end up backing down from that because he'll see it's not going to work out for him. It's going to be counterproductive, et cetera. It's going to get us more anger. It's going to make it harder for economic deals that he wants to do elsewhere. But that's his initial reaction. You get a situation where there's a spark somewhere, my friend, we could get in the same kind of a situation where it's not just a policy, but it's a firestorm. It's a bloodbath. And once something like that happens, when you're in an environment like this, where there's so much political tender and so much hatred, because you saw in that clip that I used there with President Trump, the State of the Union, all the Republicans were going crazy. They were jumping up and down and clapping and just hooting it up. Yeah, that's right. These people are crazy. And you know that they're just gritting their teeth and seething with anger on the other side, and they're saying the same things about them. They're seeing all these people jump up, and they're thinking, these guys are crazy. And in an environment where 30% of your adult population thinks it may be necessary someday to use violence to correct the ills of the country, you see that we are setting ourselves up for real problems. We've got to be so reminded about this and recognizing there's a real danger, and it is time, way past time, but we must right now ramp this down and recognize we're setting the stage for our own potential demise. We're not even talking about anything overseas. I mean, we just talked about that in the whole first part of this episode here about all of the lies being told to us and the manipulation to try to get us into a foreign war that could cost all of us here. Well, hell, we're doing stuff at home too. And this is not just the administration. This is the political entity in America. It's the right and the left. And they keep creating these conditions that are causing problems potentially for us all and just ripping our country apart. And then once it starts coming apart, folks, that violence and anger almost always has its say for a period of time. And it almost inevitably escalates. It will be damn near impossible to keep it under control and contained once that happens. And unfortunately, all too easy to escalate in addition. And we've already had secessionist movements in a number of states. Those things could get reignited. People could say, I'm afraid of the government. I'm afraid of this people. And I'm afraid of the other ones over there. And, when a lot of this red and blue are mixed within states or mixed within cities or mixed within neighborhoods sometimes, you could have all kinds of real problems here. Don't minimize this, folks. This is not just business as usual. These are clear warnings, and they've been growing over the years. We are in a dangerous situation here, and we better start ramping things down and recognizing that for all of our differences, we're still all Americans. And that we can have differences and in an environment to where it's sane and civil. So we don't have to get into a civil war. That's the concern. You need to be aware of it. This is not an alarm. It's not like I don't think something's going to happen tomorrow, but the problem is, and you need to understand this, the tinder is so dry and brittle right now. All it takes is one bad spark that nobody can predict, and everything bad becomes possible. We got to keep an eye on that. And if we see anything like that happening, we need to put some water on it real quick to get that tamped down before it blows up. Thank you very much, folks. I appreciate you listening today. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.